Each week on the show, we have a business surgery where somebody writes in and asks us, me and the guest, to solve their problem. And this week, and I won't name the person who's mailed it in, quite relevantly has said, I'm thinking of launching a podcast. What are the things I should look out for? I'm a podcast host. I'm not doing it as long as you can. So I'll do my answer, then you can give your answer. From my point of view, I think there's a number of key things. I think the first thing is, why are you doing it? Because if you aren't consistent on why you're doing it, when the shit hits the fan, which it will, and you'll get bored and it's harder work than you think, if you haven't got that, you'll give up. Number two is, who's the audience? And that has to be relevant to your content and how, not only the content, but how you deliver it. I think also the format and the cadence. So the Square Ball guys don't do it as regularly as, as it's not exactly on the same day every day. This podcast comes out every week. And I think your audience has to know when it's going to come out and expect it. And then when it doesn't, and I'm sure you guys have had this, the people go, hang on, where's the podcast? It should be out by now. I think they're some of the key points that I've experienced. Guys, what would you say to somebody who's thinking of launching a podcast?
It's interesting because the two things I've written down were why and who's it for. So yeah, I would agree with that. You need to remember, I think, that this is for somebody. I think there's often a misconception with podcasting that people think it's just a case of sitting down with somebody probably you like, maybe who's either in the business, in the case of a business podcast, or even if it's just like an entertainment or comedy thing, and you just talk and that's it. And there's so much more to it than that. So much more. The best shows sound like they are delivered like that, but they will be planned and prepped up to the eyeballs so they can sound natural. So you need to be really aware of that and put your audience first. And it's so hard to do. And I was chatting actually to some lads on another podcast. I'm just advising on just some audience growth techniques and audience retention stuff I learned when I was in radio. And saying that it's so easy to not address your new listeners. So the key to growing a podcast, I said to them, is think of your listeners in three categories: gold, silver, and bronze. So the gold ones are your super fans, the ones who will subscribe to your Patreon, will pony up, they know who you are, they care about you, they're really invested in it, they'll buy your merch. You got the silver ones, which is probably the bulk of your audience, who catch most of what you do, quite like you, don't mind if they miss a few, will dip in and out sometimes. And then there's your bronze ones, who are the new ones, or the ones sampling it for the first time, or will listen very, very occasionally. And the boundaries between them are blurred, but for the purposes of the example, it's a nice, easy way to distill them. And what you want to do is you want to funnel as many people into your bronze category, and then they will turn them into silvers and turn your silvers into golds, hopefully. And that's how you're going to grow. So many podcasts only speak to the gold and the silver listeners. And the reason for that, it's a completely natural reason, and we do it as well. So I'm constantly reminding ourselves, you do it because you're familiar with the format, you know it. So you go into it with a certain amount of assumed knowledge. Like, I speak to Michael just about every day. I know I can tee him up with certain jokes, but you can't make your jokes exclusive to new listeners. They have to be explained and understood. What are the references that you're making? That the gold listeners will go, I get that. That's an in-joke that I understand. But if you go into a pub and two people are talking in front of you and they make a little in-joke between themselves, you feel left out. So you have to remember that. It's always, everything should be pitched at new listeners all the time. And you will slip into it all the time as well, where you don't. But if you can remind yourselves on an ongoing basis, this is for new people, that's how you're going to grow. So always concentrate on the new people and the people who are going to feel excluded if you don't explain what you're talking about. So your format needs to be clear. Your characters need to be clear within your show, in my opinion, and the stuff that I was kind of coached. And it's translated into us doing pretty well out of it. So, I mean, I'm absolutely not the authority on this, but that's what I was told, the concepts that were kind of coached into me, and it makes sense to me. And it's something I try and do. Yeah.
The prep side of it's interesting, because I think a lot of people hopefully hear it. But it's not scripted at all, but we do have a lot of bullet points, and we have things we're going to talk about. And if it's the case of like the propaganda show that we do, which is clips, like that's all laid out in an order on a sheet, so we know what's coming.
Yeah, it's Gogglebox for football podcasts, isn't it?
Essentially, yeah. So, but that there's a lot of work goes into that. The clips are edited. They're not just taken directly from a YouTube clip. I'll take bits out of them to make them more compact. I'll try and make things as punchy as possible in the build up to it. And it's all prep that maybe you don't hopefully listening to the show, you actually don't realise it's happened. But the way that it's compacted down to make it as concise as possible, so it becomes a faster moving show and stuff like that. So try and
energy, pacing,
and that all, but that all comes from the prep, because there's a way you could do that show differently, but it'd involve listening to like a 5-minute clip, and maybe your attention drifts off a little bit halfway through it, but trying to keep it as punchy as we can.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it's not just turning on the mics and start talking.
Yeah, basically.
It is. You can do that, and you can enjoy a certain amount of success with that. But I mean, everybody will be familiar with the phrase, probably, like the attention economy, and it's something we've spoken about often. People, listeners and viewers, they're fundamentally quite selfish, and everybody knows this because it's the way that you will, even as a podcast host, you will consume stuff on YouTube or Spotify, something like that. You hear a song that the algorithm serves up, you don't like it, you swipe next, and people will treat your show in the same way. If you don't deliver what they want to hear, they're out of there. So you're constantly fighting against, and it's other distractions. The attention economy. It's not just, you're not just fighting against other podcasts in the same space. You're fighting against the kids in the back of the car. You're fighting against YouTube, the TV, whatever it might be. You know, if you're on a dog walk, your dogs run off. Everything is fighting for your attention. So you need to constantly remind yourself that people will drift out at the first opportunity. So you need to just trim all the fat. So you can sit down and just talk, but you will lose people. And you need to know when to get in and out of a point. But they're skills that just take time, I think.
I think for a new podcast as well, it's thinking about where it's going to be in 6 months. We're fortunate, really, that we do a Leeds podcast. So it's a constant changing thing. There are games every week. There are transfers. There's just always something happening. A lot of podcasts are built around a concept, and then they maybe lend themselves more to, is it like, are you going to aim to do a series here? Is this going to be a 10-part podcast, which then ends and you do another 10 parts 3 months later? Or is it something you're going to try and do every week? Because if you're going to do something every week, you need something new to talk about every week, because it'll get dry pretty quickly if you just like, well, this is a concept that I came up with a few weeks ago.
Yeah, because football never stops, does it? It's 10 months of the year and there's always a game.
Exactly.
So, and you know, transfers and stuff happen around that, and just drama and news and injuries and stuff. But if it's a business setting, what are you going to talk about? So I'm going to do a podcast about my business. Well, what are you going to talk about? Is it going to be the same in 4 or 5 weeks? Yeah.
You've probably got an idea for what your first few episodes will be, but what then? I suppose is what the
and
first
also
would say.
Record some episodes and don't put them out.
See what they sound like.
Yeah, because it takes ages to find your proper voice. And I mean, again, authenticity is just, it's everything. In a world that kind of engages in rage bait and clickbait and sensationalism, you just need to be authentic. The world is crying out for authenticity, I think, at the minute. And I think it's one of the things we try and lean into. I mean, 95% of what we are on the show is us. There's a bit of embellishment. There's 5% of kind of, I don't know, developing characters and playing up to sort of stereotypes about our characters. But that actually makes it easy for people to relate to us because, apologies for this, but he's the bald one. He's the funny one. He's the one who's tight with his money. It's easy to characterize him, I would say it's like when you're going to stag do and you will turn up at the start of a weekend and nobody knows each other. The journey you want to go on with your audience is going from that kind of awkwardness and learning who each other are and what are the characteristics that you have and you share, and how do you explain who you are to somebody else in that stag party and think, I don't want him to think like I'm a twat. Just little things like that. So it's kind of going on that journey. So by the end of the stag weekend, you've bonded with maybe somebody in there who loves you and thinks you're great and you'll keep in touch. Somebody else might think you're a dickhead, and it's fine. It's fine for people to not like you. But go on that journey from the start of the stag weekend to the end with your listeners. I think that's a really nice way to kind of think about it.
I think one other thing as well, and the vast majority of people cannot commercialize a podcast. Just give us an idea of the size of the listenership we're talking about that you're commercializing.
So we do about, at the minute, 550,000 listens per month audio, and
that's via the Acast platform. So that excludes paying subscribers because they get their feed on if you're using Patreon, it's a similar system, but it's within our own ecosystem. But it's a long URL that you add to your player. Yeah. So, and it doesn't include YouTube either, which is...
It's about 300,000 or 400,000 streams per month. But again, I don't know exactly how a stream's counted. And your watch times on YouTube are far lower than you get from audio engagement. So it's a slightly different beast. But yeah, you're probably talking about reaching about 750,000, 800,000 people every...
Wow.
Well, listens.
Listens or streams.
Not individuals.
Might not be individuals, yeah.
But,
so it's a lot.
Okay, so I hope that answers the question on our business surgery.